welcome everyone to this bright spot entitled Restoring Connections, Nurturing Relationships with the More Than Human World. Today, we're going to highlight a few lessons learned from a collaborative project that brought together a nonprofit, a public elementary school, and a university to explore how we could help children, regardless of ability or background, develop really meaningful relationships to nature. So to get started, let me introduce myself. My name is Katie Lynch, and I co-direct the Environmental Leadership Program at the University of Oregon. For over 15 years now, I've been directing environmental ed projects in which small teams of undergraduates collaborate with nonprofits and other community partners to develop and implement interdisciplinary, experiential, place-based environmental ed. I'd like to get this started today by acknowledging that where I live and work here in Eugene and at the University of Oregon is located on Kalapuya Ilihi, or the traditional indigenous homelands of the Kalapuyan peoples. I share this information out of respect and humility for the indigenous peoples who continue to live and thrive in what is now called the state of Oregon. And because all environmental ed that we do is done on indigenous homelands. To provide us a little bit of framing, I think everyone in this audience already knows that compelling evidence already exists that nature-based instruction outperforms traditional instruction, suggesting that nature exposure impacts the learner by helping them be able to concentrate, reducing stress levels, allowing for more self-discipline, more engagement because students are having fun, and also getting them more physically active and fit, as well as influencing the learning context, providing often calmer, quieter, safer social contexts, or warmer and more collaborative, cooperative social contexts, and then also the loose parts idea that nature provides. And these contexts, this nature exposure, working through these mechanisms, has been really shown to have positive impacts on academic achievement, on personal development, as well as on stewardship behavior. So that's the framework. We know we want to get kids outside more, and how we do that is the trick, right? Because as we know, unfortunately, access to nature is not equitably distributed. Opt-in after-school programs and camps just don't reach everyone. So in the next few minutes, I'll try to provide a very brief overview of how the Environmental Leadership Program at U of O is working to expand access to nature in our community through this partnership. Restoring Connections was designed on the premise that children need repeated and scaffolded interactions to build these meaningful relationships with the more than human world. Therefore, instead of the single field trip, which is so common, in this project, we worked repeatedly with a single cohort of approximately 90 elementary school children as they move from kindergarten all the way through to 5th grade. The students participated in classroom activities and then a field trip to Mount Pisgah Arboretum once every season. So fall, winter, spring, for a total of 3 trips each year for a grand total of 18 field trips, which was reduced to 14 due to COVID. But 18 field trips was the goal for their elementary school years. One of our goals was to ensure that the program was inclusive and accessible to all students, regardless of ability or background. We collaborated with the principal, the teachers, and the in-house life skills and special ed teachers to address needs with the goal of having all of our students participating, whether they were in a wheelchair, blind, or needing special supports to make it work. Each year, the children explored the flora and fauna of a different Southern Willamette Valley ecosystem. For example, our first graders explored the oak woodlands, while our second graders learned about the Douglas fir forests and so on. And each field trip followed a similar rhythm, just as classroom teachers do, right? So they establish their rhythm. So we would always start with an active hands-on games and interactive learning in the morning, like this cattail study. And then we would move to more reflective sit spot time after lunch, where students would sit quietly for 10 to 15 minutes alone, spread out along the trail, ideally out of sight from one another, and quietly use all of their senses to make field observations, which they would then record in their field notebooks, resulting in a portfolio documenting all of their discoveries over 6 years. Stories were an integral part of our strategy. As Robin Wall Kimmerer notes, stories are among our most potent tools for restoring the land, as well as our relationships to land. So guides use stories to engage students throughout the day, to spark their enthusiasm, hone their sensory awareness, convey ground rules, and model how to be in nature, as well as to recall previous adventures. And then at the end of the day, students got to share their own stories too, highlighting the cool things and things they'd seen or experiences they'd had. And so this created peer-to-peer learning and created community, and demonstrated that it was possible to have amazing close encounters with the plants and animals that share our home. Every field day ended with a gratitude circle, which provided a really lovely window into their expanding sense of relationship. For not only were the guides and the chaperones thanked, which is common at the beginning, but it gradually expanded to include the Mount Pisgah caretakers. And then by the end of first grade, students were thanking the trees and the plants themselves. And then eventually gratitude was extended to the river and to the rain, really demonstrating their growing sense of relationship and understanding of the complex relationships in our community. Each year also followed a similar rhythm with introductions to the habitat and concepts in the fall and winter. And then in the spring, each grade participated in a hands-on restoration or stewardship activity. So in the first grade, students pulled invasive species and planted native wildflowers, while in second grade, they got to mulch trails. Third graders built habitats for birds, bats, and mason bees. And this just gives you a sense that these restoration and stewardship activities were designed to instill an ethic of reciprocity and stewardship. So building on that sense of relationship that they had been developing in the fall and the winter, and then in the spring. The Restoring Connections project really centered restoring our relationships. So to intentionally provide space and time for our children to make real, lasting connections to the land and to the plants and animals that also call this home. This collaboration developed in response to the perennial staffing challenges faced by local environmental ed nonprofits and the need for instructional and funding support for field trips at our local schools. So by tapping undergraduates interested in careers in environmental education, and by working with public schools, we were able to reach children who might not have had the opportunity to participate in nature learning otherwise. So partnering with the public schools was a critical element when considering equity. Second, while our focus was on nurturing a personal, intimate nature connection, we were also able to integrate the next generation science standards to ensure that the program wasn't seen as an add-on or as a bonus at the end of the year for good behavior. So critically, we worked with the principals and the teachers to conceptualize and make this program part of the curriculum. And we intentionally and explicitly framed every single field trip for the students, as well as the chaperones and the teachers, that this was not an all-day recess free-for-all, but rather that we were taking our science classroom outside for the day. Finally, we need to provide the supports to help districts, school administrators, and teachers be more proactive in using school grounds and nearby parks for outside learning, so that they can replicate this idea of repeated and scaffolded interactions with nature. Doing so is a strategic, cost-effective tool for improving academic, mental, and physical well-being for our youth, especially after the shutdowns due to COVID. I'd like to end by saying thank you to NAAEE for the opportunity to share this Project Bright Spot with you all. And although we aren't together and live, I hope you will connect with me afterwards if you have any questions or ideas or want to learn more. And we can pretend we're out in the hallway between sessions. Thank you very much. And ending.